When my son told me his wife's parents were flying in from out of state for a special dinner, and that they'd finally get to meet me, I felt a familiar flutter of nerves. But it wasn't the kind of nerves you get before meeting new people. It was the kind you get when you know you're about to be judged and found lacking. You see, to my son, Daniel, I've always been just mom. The one who packs his lunch when he visits, who still has the same old couch from when he was a teenager, who clips coupons and drives a 10-year-old car. He sees a woman who worked a steady but unremarkable state job for 30 years. And I let him see that. I needed him to see that. I never told him about the other side of my life. I never told him that for the last 15 years, alongside my state job, I'd been building something of my own. A small online business, at first just a hobby, selling antique maps and prints I'd find at estate sales. It grew. Slowly, quietly, it grew into something substantial. I never told him that my modest retirement savings was a number with more zeros than he could probably imagine. I never told him that I owned the small, charming bookshop in the next town over, the one he'd always loved to browse in as a kid. Why? Because money, especially when you haven't grown up with it, can be a poison. It can change the way people see you, and worse, it can change the way you see yourself. I wanted Daniel to learn the value of $1 the hard way, like I did. I wanted him to know the pride of building his own life, not waiting for an inheritance. His wife, Chloe, came from a different world. Her family had money, old money, the kind they don't like to talk about but make sure everyone knows is there. They lived in a gated community in a neighboring state, and from what I gathered from Daniel's careful, edited stories, they were particular. Chloe was sweet, a little anxious, but sweet. I always got the feeling she was trying to live up to a standard she hadn't quite reached. So when Daniel called that Tuesday evening, his voice tight, I knew this dinner wasn't just a meal. It was a test, an inspection. "It's just a nice dinner, Mom," he'd said, but I could hear the plea in his voice. "Her parents, Richard and Patricia, they really want to meet you. The restaurant is fancy, but don't worry about it. Just be yourself." Just be yourself. But which self? The self they were expecting. The humble, retired state employee, a little out of her depth in a fancy restaurant, or the woman who could buy and sell that restaurant without batting an eye. I decided, right then, to let them see what they wanted to see. I'd go as Carol Ann, the simple woman. I wanted to know, once and for all, what kind of people my son had married into. I wanted to see their true faces when they thought no one was watching. I put on my best plain dress, the navy blue one I'd had for years, comfortable shoes, my old, reliable cloth handbag. I looked in the mirror. I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be, a nice, unassuming, slightly out-of-fashion grandmother. The taxi dropped me off in front of a restaurant that looked more like a private estate. Soft lights glowed from every window. Valets in crisp uniforms moved expensive cars with quiet efficiency. I took a deep breath, clutched my handbag a little tighter, and walked in. The moment I stepped through the heavy wooden door, everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, about the night ahead, began to change. The maitre d' led me through the dining room. I could feel eyes on me, or maybe I just imagined it. In my plain dress and comfortable shoes, I felt like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a cage full of peacocks. And then I saw them. Daniel was standing by a round table near a large window overlooking a garden. He looked handsome in a blazer, but his smile was strained. Beside him, Chloe sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap. And then there were Richard and Patricia. Richard was a big man with a tanned, weathered face and a head of thick silver hair. He had the easy, confident posture of someone used to giving orders. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit and a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my car. He gave me a polite, appraising nod. Patricia was the opposite. Slim, elegant, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She wore a simple but undoubtedly expensive cream-colored dress and a single strand of pearls. Her smile was a careful, practiced thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who has decided to be gracious, but is already bored. "Mom," Daniel said a little too loudly, getting up to greet me. He gave me a quick, tight hug. "I'm so glad you're here. You look great." He didn't mean it. He was looking at my dress. I saw the flicker of worry in his eyes. Chloe stood up and gave me a soft, quick kiss on the cheek. "Hi, Carol. It's so good to see you. These are my parents, Richard and Patricia." I extended my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. Thank you for including me." Richard's handshake was firm, brief. "Carol Ann, Daniel's told us a lot about you." I doubted that very much. Patricia's hand was cool and limp. "Lovely to finally meet you, dear. Daniel speaks so highly of you. Please sit." I sat down in the chair Daniel pulled out for me. It was at the far end of the round table, almost opposite Patricia. It felt intentional, like a seating chart designed to keep the less impressive guests at a comfortable distance. The waiter appeared instantly, a young man in a crisp black vest. He handed out menus that were heavy, leather-bound, and completely without prices. I'd seen menus like this before in business meetings where the goal was to impress, not to eat. Patricia immediately took charge. "We'll start with a bottle of the Shade Margox, the 05 if you have it, and some sparkling water for the table." The waiter nodded and glided away. Patricia turned her attention to me. "Daniel tells us you worked for the state. For how long was that?" 30 years, I said, keeping my voice soft. "In the administrative office for the Parks Department." "The Parks Department," Richard repeated, a faint smile on his lips. "That must have been fulfilling, lots of fresh air." "It was honest work," I replied calmly. "I enjoyed it." "And now you're retired?" Patricia asked, taking a delicate sip of her water. "Yes, for a few years now. I keep busy. I read a lot. I help out at a local bookshop sometimes." Patricia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a millimeter. "How charming. A bookshop. It's wonderful to have passions in retirement. Richard, you remember my Aunt Alina? She tried to help out at a charity shop once. It lasted a week. She said the clientele wasn't up to her standards." She let out a little laugh, a tinkling, practiced sound. Richard chuckled. "That sounds like Alina." I just smiled. The first little dart had been thrown. It was subtle, buried under a layer of social grace, but it was there. "You're quaint, but you don't belong here." The wine arrived. The sommelier presented the bottle to Richard with a flourish. He gave it a cursory glance and nodded. After the ritual of tasting and pouring, we all had a glass of wine that cost more than a week's worth of my groceries. Daniel tried to steer the conversation. "So, Dad, you were telling me about that new golf course you're helping to design in Florida." Richard launched into a detailed explanation about zoning laws, environmental impact studies, and the importance of having a signature hole. It was a world of deals and influence that felt a million miles away from my small, quiet life. Patricia listened, nodding along, occasionally interjecting with a detail about the clubhouse's interior design, which she was apparently overseeing. Chloe was quiet, mostly staring at her plate. She would occasionally glance at me, her expression a mixture of pity and apology. I felt for her. She was trapped between two worlds, too. After Richard finished his story, the conversation turned back to me, like a spotlight swinging around to expose an unexpected shadow. "So, Carol Ann," Patricia said, leaning forward slightly, her tone one of mock concern. "Living alone now in that apartment, isn't it a bit much at your age? The stairs, the upkeep." "It's a small building, only 2 floors. I'm on the first floor, so it's no trouble at all," I assured her. "Well, that's a relief," she said, not looking relieved at all. "But still, it must get lonely. And on a fixed retirement income, everything must be so carefully budgeted. The cost of everything these days, it's just dreadful." This time, the dart was sharper. She wasn't just calling me quaint anymore. She was painting me as vulnerable, a potential burden. "I manage just fine, Patricia. I've always been careful. It's a habit you learn when you don't have a safety net." Richard looked up from his wine. "A good habit, an important one. We've tried to teach Chloe the same thing. It's not about how much you have, it's about how you manage it." He said it as if he were bestowing a great pearl of wisdom upon the class. Of course, it's easier to learn those lessons when you have a little something to manage. The conversation drifted again to their travels, their properties, their investments. Every sentence was a subtle reminder of their status, their wealth, their superiority. They weren't bragging, not overtly. They were just establishing the landscape. They were the mountains, and I was a small, pleasant hill. Dinner arrived. Exquisite little portions of food that looked like tiny sculptures. I ate quietly, letting them talk. I watched my son, Daniel. He was trying so hard to fit into their world, to laugh at Richard's jokes, to agree with Patricia's opinions on art and travel. He looked uncomfortable, like a man wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too small. And in that moment, a cold, hard knot of sadness formed in my stomach. They weren't just judging me. They were judging him through me, and he knew it. He was ashamed of his simple mother, the woman who clipped coupons and drove an old car. He loved me, I knew he did. But in this restaurant, under the weight of their elegant disapproval, he was embarrassed by me. The thought hurt more than any of Patricia's little darts. As the plates were cleared, Patricia delicately dabbed her lips with her napkin and fixed me with a look that was all business. "Carol Ann," she began, her voice softer now, more conspiratorial. "I'm so glad we have this chance to talk woman to woman. We love Daniel. He's a wonderful young man and he makes our Chloe very happy. And because we love them, we only want the best for them. We want to see them build a stable, secure, and happy life." I nodded, waiting. The knot in my stomach tightened. "Richard and I have been talking," she continued. "We've been so fortunate, and we believe in sharing that fortune with our children. We've already helped them with their home, but we want to do more. We've set up a trust for them, and we contribute to it regularly. It gives them a wonderful safety net. It allows them to live without the constant, grinding worry that so many young couples face." She paused, letting that sink in. Richard nodded in agreement. "And of course," Patricia said, her eyes locking onto mine, "we want to make sure that their path is as smooth as possible, that there are no unexpected burdens, no unforeseen complications that could add stress to their lives." There it was, the word, burdens, complications. She wasn't talking about their trust fund. She was talking about me. The silence that followed Patricia's words was thick enough to be cut with a knife. She hadn't said it directly, of course. People like her never do. But the meaning was clear. We are the solution. You are the problem. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, giving myself a moment. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I'd learned over a lifetime to keep my face calm, my voice steady. It was a skill born of decades of navigating office politics and difficult negotiations. I just smiled a little, a confused, naive smile. "Burdens?" I asked, my voice small. "What kind of complications do you mean?" Patricia leaned in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Well, dear, let's be practical. As we get older, things can get complicated. Health issues, the need for more care, unexpected expenses. It's a worry for any child. And Daniel, being the good man he is, would feel that worry acutely. He would feel responsible. We just want to ensure that his focus can remain where it should be, on his wife, on his career, on building his own family." Richard chimed in, his tone a little more direct. "What Patricia is trying to say, Carol, is that we're in a position to help, to alleviate any potential future stress. We were thinking we could set up a small, monthly stipend for you, just to help with incidentals, medical costs, maybe even help with a move to a nice, assisted living community down the line, something comfortable and secure. It would take the pressure off Daniel completely." A stipend? They wanted to give me an allowance, like a child or a charity case. They wanted to pay for me to be quietly tucked away somewhere so I wouldn't be an embarrassment, a reminder of the world Daniel came from. I looked at Daniel. He was pale, his jaw tight. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Chloe was staring at the tablecloth, her knuckles white. They knew. They knew what was happening, and they were letting it happen. "That's incredibly generous," I said, my voice still soft. "I don't know what to say." Patricia's smile widened, a predator sensing the prey has given up. "You don't have to say anything, dear. It's simply what family does. We look out for one another. We just want to make sure everyone is comfortable." Comfortable, such a simple word, but in her mouth it meant out of the way. "And of course," she added, as if it were a minor detail, "this would just be between us, a little private arrangement. We wouldn't want Daniel to feel any pressure. We just want to give him the gift of a worry-free future. The gift of a worry-free future. By removing his mother from the equation. By making me their dependent, their pensioner. I thought about my own quiet life. The mornings in my little apartment with a book and a cup of coffee. The afternoons at the bookshop, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the quiet rustle of pages. The feeling of absolute, total freedom. I thought about the bank account that held not just my retirement savings, but the profits from years of quiet work, an amount that would make Patricia's stipend look like pocket change. I thought about the deed to the bookshop, tucked away in my filing cabinet. And I thought about my son, my Daniel, the little boy who used to hold my hand so tightly when we crossed the street. The teenager who'd stay up late helping me with my online listings, thinking it was just a fun way to make a few extra dollars. The man who was now sitting at this table, ashamed to look at me, while his in-laws tried to buy me off. The rage I felt wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, clear, and sharp as a blade. It wasn't rage at them, not entirely. It was rage at the situation, at the cruelty of it, at the way they had so casually, so politely, tried to erase me. And it was a deep, profound disappointment in my son. But I kept my face still. I kept my voice calm, because I knew in that moment that this wasn't over. They had shown me who they were. Now it was my turn. "I really am touched by your offer," I said, putting my napkin on the table. "It's so thoughtful of you to think of my comfort." Patricia beamed. Richard gave a satisfied nod. They thought they had won. "But I have to say," I continued, my voice shifting ever so slightly, losing its timid edge, "I'm a little confused. Daniel tells me you're very successful. You have this big house, the investments, the travel. You clearly value financial independence." "We do," Richard said, a hint of pride in his voice. "So help me understand," I said, looking directly at Patricia. "Why would you offer to take away the very thing you value most from someone else, my independence?" Patricia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. We're not trying to take anything away, dear. We're trying to enhance it, to give you security." "By making me dependent on you?" I asked, my voice still calm. "By offering me a monthly allowance like I'm a teenager who can't manage her own money?" Richard cleared his throat. "Now, Carol, let's not get defensive. It was a simple offer of help." "Was it?" I asked. "Because it felt less like help and more like a transaction. You helped me disappear financially, so I'm not a burden or a complication in the perfect life you've built for your daughter and my son. Isn't that the truth of it?" The table went silent. The clinking of glasses from other tables suddenly seemed very loud. Patricia's face was a mask of controlled outrage. Richard's jaw was set. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes wide with shock and fear. "Mom," he whispered, "please." I looked at him then, and the disappointment I felt must have shone in my eyes because he flinched. "Please what, Daniel? Please be quiet. Please let them finish arranging my life for me." Chloe started to cry, silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. Patricia straightened up, her gracious act gone, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "Carol, I think you're being overly sensitive. We were only trying to be kind. We have more than enough, and we believe in sharing our good fortune. If you're too proud to accept it, that's your choice." "Pride has nothing to do with it," I said quietly. "I just prefer honesty, and this entire conversation, this entire dinner, has been anything but honest." Richard leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "Look, let's cut to the chase. We know Daniel's situation. We know he worries about you. We're in a position to alleviate that worry. It's that simple. We're not here to insult you. We're here to find a practical solution." "A practical solution to what exactly?" I pressed. "To the fact that I live in a small apartment, that I drive an old car, that I don't wear designer clothes. Is my poverty so offensive to you?" "It's not about offense," Patricia snapped, her patience finally breaking. "It's about quality of life for them, for you. We want Daniel to be able to focus on his future with our daughter without the weight of a parent who might need things." There it was, the mask was off. All pretense of kindness was gone. She had laid it all out on the table. I was a weight, a burden, a problem to be solved. I took a deep, slow breath. the calm before the storm. I looked at each of them in turn, Patricia with her cold, entitled fury, Richard with his practical bulldozer mentality, Chloe lost in her tears, and finally Daniel, my son, looking like a lost little boy. Then I reached down and picked up my old, worn cloth handbag. I placed it gently on the table in front of me. "You know," I began, my voice so soft they had to lean in to hear, "I've spent my whole life being underestimated. When I was a young, single mother, people assumed I'd never make it. When I took that state job, people assumed I'd just coast along until retirement. When I started my little hobby business, people assumed it was just a way to pass the time." I pulled a simple black leather checkbook from my bag. Not a fancy designer one, just a standard bank-issued checkbook. I placed it on the table next to my water glass. "People see what they expect to see," I continued. "You looked at me tonight and you saw exactly what you expected to see. A poor, retired state employee, a potential burden, someone who could be managed." Patricia's eyes were fixed on the checkbook, a flicker of confusion on her face. Richard just looked impatient. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Carol," Richard said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But this little display of defiance is unnecessary." "Is it?" I asked, opening the checkbook. I pulled a simple pen from my bag. "You offered me a monthly stipend. A practical solution, you called it. Let me offer you a practical solution in return." I wrote on the check for a moment, the scratch of the pen the only sound at our table. Then I tore it out, held it up for a moment so they could see the bank logo, the date, and then I slid it across the white tablecloth, coming to a stop right in front of Patricia. It was a cashier's check, made out to the charity foundation of your choice, for $150,000. Patricia stared at it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Richard leaned over to look, his face going from impatient to pale in the space of a heartbeat. What is this?" Patricia stammered, her voice a strangled whisper. "That," I said calmly, "is a fraction of what I made last year from my little hobby. The one I started in my spare time while working for the state. The one that lets me live in my small apartment and drive my old car because I choose to, not because I have to." I looked at Daniel, whose face was a canvas of pure shock. "I never told you, baby, because I wanted you to build your own life. I wanted you to know the pride of standing on your own 2 feet. I was so afraid that if you knew about the money, it would change things. It would change you." I turned back to Richard and Patricia, who were both staring at the check as if it were a venomous snake. "The bookshop in town, the one Daniel loved as a child, I own it. The building it's in, I own that too, the little online business. It's now a multi-state operation with 12 employees. It's not a hobby, Richard, it's a company, and I built it from nothing." The silence was absolute. The elegant sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the heavy, ragged breathing of the people at our table. Patricia's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the deep flush of humiliation spreading across her cheeks. Richard looked like a man who had just been punched in the gut. You lied to us," Patricia finally managed to choke out, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You sat there all night, playing the victim, letting you show me exactly who you are," I finished for her, my voice still calm. "Yes, I did. I needed to know. For Daniel's sake. I needed to know if he had married into a family of good people or just people with money." I looked at Chloe, whose tears had stopped, replaced by a look of dawning, horrified understanding. "I'm sorry you had to see this, Chloe, but I think you needed to see it too." Then I looked at Daniel. His eyes were glistening. He wasn't looking at me with shame anymore. He was looking at me with something else entirely. Awe, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hurt. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, son," I said, my voice finally cracking just a little. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough. I was trying to protect you and I ended up hurting you. I see that now." Daniel didn't say anything. He just stared at me, processing a lifetime of assumptions crumbling around him. Patricia pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several heads turned our way. "This is outrageous," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You orchestrated this whole charade. You made fools of us on purpose." "I didn't make fools of you, Patricia," I said, looking up at her with pity. "You did that all by yourselves. I just provided the stage." Richard finally found his voice, a low growl. "We're leaving, now." He threw several bills on the table, enough to cover the meal many times over. He stood up, his face a thundercloud of rage and humiliation. Chloe stood up too, her movements jerky and uncertain. "Mom, Dad, wait." "Get your things, Chloe," Patricia commanded, not looking at her daughter. "We're going back to the hotel." Chloe looked at me, then at Daniel, her face a silent plea for help. But this was her fight now. Patricia grabbed her purse. Before she turned to leave, she shot me one last look, a look of pure, undiluted hatred. "You haven't heard the last of this." "Probably not," I agreed. "But I'm not worried. I've dealt with tougher negotiators than you." They swept out of the restaurant, a tornado of fury and wounded pride, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Chloe hesitated for a second, then followed them, her shoulders slumped. And then it was just me and Daniel, sitting at a table for 4 in a restaurant full of strangers. The check I'd written still lay on the white cloth, a silent testament to the bombshell I'd just dropped. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Daniel just sat there, staring at the check. He reached out a hand and touched it, gently, as if to make sure it was real. $150,000, he murmured, reading the amount. "You just had this in your bag." "I have a few of them," I said quietly. "For emergencies, for investments, I always have." He finally looked up at me, and the look in his eyes broke my heart. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, bewildered confusion. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I mean, I thought I knew. I thought you were just Mom, the one who made meatloaf on Tuesdays and worried about the heating bill. How could I not know this?" I reached across the table and took his hand. He let me. "Because I hid it, Daniel. I hid it on purpose. And I'm so sorry for that." A tear I hadn't even felt forming slipped down my cheek. "When your father left, we had nothing. Less than nothing. I remember counting out coins to buy you a carton of milk. I remember the shame of it, the fear. I promised myself then that you would never know that fear, that you would never feel defined by a lack of money." He listened, his hand limp in mine. "But I also saw what money did to other people. I saw colleagues get promotions and become insufferable. I saw families torn apart by inheritance fights. I saw rich kids who had no drive, no ambition, no gratitude. They had everything handed to them and they were miserable. Empty." I squeezed his hand. "I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to know the value of a hard day's work. I wanted you to learn to budget, to save, to dream about things you had to earn. I wanted you to become a man of character, not just an heir to a bank account. Can you understand that?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers with mine. "I understand," he said, his voice rough. "I think I do, but it still hurts, Mom. It hurts that you didn't trust me. It hurts that you felt you had to pretend all these years." "I know, baby, I know, and I was wrong. I was so focused on protecting you from one thing, I ended up hurting you with another. There's no excuse for it. I should have told you years ago when the business first started to take off. I was just scared. Scared of losing the son I had, the one who needed me, to a stranger who only saw a wallet." We sat in silence for a while longer, just holding hands. The waiter came by hesitantly, and I quietly asked him to box up the desserts and bring the check. He brought the check, and I placed my black credit card on top of it. No showmanship this time, just a simple transaction. "What happens now?" Daniel asked as we waited. "That's up to you," I said, "and Chloe and her parents." He let out a bitter laugh. "Her parents? They're never going to forgive you for this, or me for that matter. They'll probably blame me for the whole thing." "Probably," I agreed. "But that's not your problem. It's theirs. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want with them? And what kind of life do you want to build with Chloe?" He looked towards the door where his wife had disappeared. "I don't know, I love her. But seeing them tonight, seeing how they treated you, and how she just sat there and let it happen, it makes me wonder." "Don't give up on her yet," I advised softly. She's been conditioned her whole life to be quiet, to not make waves. Tonight might be the shock she needs to finally break free. Give her time. Give her a chance to choose. The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. I signed it, left a generous tip, and stood up. Daniel stood with me. "Walk me out," I asked. He nodded. We walked through the now quiet restaurant, past the curious glances of the remaining staff. The valet brought my car around, my old, reliable sedan. It looked comically out of place among the Porsches and Mercedes. I turned to Daniel before I got in. "I love you, Daniel, more than anything, and I am so proud of the man you've become. That pride has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with you. I'm sorry I didn't say that enough. I'm sorry I didn't show you that I trusted you. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me." He pulled me into a tight hug, the kind of hug he hadn't given me since he was a little boy. "I love you too, Mom. We'll figure it out. We'll figure all of it out." I got in my car and drove home. The streets were quiet, the city asleep. I replayed the entire evening in my head, every look, every word. The confrontation with Patricia and Richard had been necessary, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a surgery, painful but cleansing. The real work was just beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of difficult conversations. Daniel and Chloe had long, painful talks. Chloe was torn between loyalty to her parents and the realization of how toxic their behavior was. There were tearful phone calls, angry emails from Patricia, a formal, cold letter from Richard's lawyer, which my own lawyer answered with a single, polite paragraph. It was a mess. Daniel came to see me a lot. We talked more openly than we ever had. About my work, his childhood, his fears, my regrets. The money was no longer a secret between us, but it also wasn't the focus. We were finally just being honest with each other, and it was healing something in both of us. A month later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Chloe. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. "Carol," she said, her voice steady, "can we talk?" I led her into the living room. She sat on my old sofa, the one Daniel had sprawled on as a teenager, and took a deep breath. "I'm leaving them," she said. "Not forever, but for now. Daniel and I have talked about it. We're going to take a break from seeing them. We need space to figure out who we are without their influence." I just nodded, letting her speak. "That night at the restaurant," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I saw myself in you. The way they looked at you, the way they talked to you. That's how they've always talked to me, just in a different way, with a little more polish. I've spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and I realized that night that I never would, because their approval isn't about love, it's about control." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "When you wrote that check, when you stood up to them, it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You just showed them who you really were, and their whole world crumbled. I want to be like that. I want to be that strong." I reached out and took her hand. "You already are, Chloe. You're stronger than you know. It takes immense strength to walk away from the only world you've ever known." She finally let the tears fall. "I'm so sorry for that night, for not saying anything, for being a coward." "You weren't a coward," I said firmly. "You were a survivor doing what you had to do to get by. That's not the same thing. The question is, who do you want to be now?" She looked at me, her eyes full of hope and fear. "I want to be like you. I want to build something of my own, something real. Daniel and I, we want to start over. We don't want their money. We want to do it ourselves, like you did." A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling of profound hope. "Then that's exactly what you'll do, and I'll be right here, cheering you on every step of the way." And so life went on, but it was different now, better. Richard and Patricia tried to reassert control for a while. They withheld financial support, hoping Daniel and Chloe would come crawling back. But they didn't. Daniel got a promotion at work, a testament to the hard work he'd always put in. Chloe, with a fire I hadn't seen before, enrolled in a graphic design course at the local community college. She was building something slowly with her own two hands. They moved out of the house Richard and Patricia had helped them buy. It was too big for them anyway, and it came with too many strings. They found a small, charming fixer-upper not far from me. Daniel spent his weekends learning to patch drywall and lay flooring. He was covered in dust and sweat, and he was happier than I'd ever seen him. Eventually, Richard and Patricia realized their tactics weren't working. Their daughter wasn't coming back. They sent a few stiff, formal emails. Then, about a year after that fateful dinner, they showed up at Daniel and Chloe's new house. Not with lawyers or threats, but just as themselves. Older, maybe a little humbler. I wasn't there, but Daniel told me about it later. He said they were quiet. They looked at the half-finished renovations, at the life their daughter was building, and for the first time, they didn't criticize. Patricia even offered to help Chloe pick out paint colors, a small, almost timid offer. It was a start, a tiny, fragile start. Chloe comes to see me every week now. Sometimes for advice, sometimes just to sit and have a cup of tea and talk about nothing at all. We've become friends, real friends. She calls me Mom sometimes, and it makes my heart swell every time. As for me, I still live in my little apartment. I still drive my old car. I still spend my afternoons at the bookshop, surrounded by the smell of paper and the quiet hum of contentment. But now, Daniel and Chloe are a part of that peace. He'll pop in after work. She'll send me pictures of her latest design project. The secret I kept for so long is no longer a wall between us, but a bridge. I look back on that night at the restaurant, and I don't see a victory. I see a reckoning. A moment when old wounds were ripped open so they could finally, properly heal. It was painful and messy, and nothing like the quiet, simple life I'd tried so hard to build. But it was real. For the first time in a long time, it was all real. I learned something that night, sitting across from my son in that fancy restaurant. I learned that protection, when it's based on fear, can become its own kind of prison. I was so busy protecting Daniel from the burden of money that I forgot to give him the one thing he truly needed: my trust. My belief that he was strong enough, good enough, to handle the truth. And in the end, he proved me right. He didn't need my money. He didn't want it. All he ever wanted was me. His mom, the one who made meatloaf on Tuesdays. So now I keep my checkbook in the drawer and I keep my heart wide open. I've learned that true wealth isn't something you keep in the bank. It's something you share. It's the laughter in a small, half-finished house. It's the forgiveness in a cup of shared tea. It's the quiet knowledge that the people you love most in the world know you, all of you, and love you back just the same. And that, I've finally learned, is a gift more valuable than any check I could ever write. It was everything. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.